Hello, 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 and good morning. This is Bobby Jones, and this is Anchor Watch. Thank you for joining us today. We will get right back into the um, American Civics 101 segment that we have started here, and we're going to talk about the um, the preamble of the United States Constitution. I think it's important that we understand that every word that was put on parchment literally
Oh,
matters.
so
American Civics 101. I told you that we are going to go through and talk about our country and how it's structured as a government, why it is structured that way, and most importantly, how it affects you. So we're going to go ahead and start. The United States Constitution. Last week I talked about the sections it was broken into. I'm going to talk today about the first part, the one that everybody talks about the most, the preamble. The preamble of the Constitution has meaning. It has motivation. We're going to talk about its historical roots, and then how does it apply to you today? So let's go to the next slide here. The preamble, the text right there. We the people that everybody talks about of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure democratic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, the reason these words are powerful is not because it's, great wordsmithing. I mean, it is great wordsmithing, but how it was actually applied. So we go to the next slide here. How did we get to this? The motivation for the Constitution, the motivation for this section of the Constitution, it goes back to what America had first, and that was the Articles of Confederation. So once the Revolutionary War ended in the early 1780s at Yorktown, 1781, um, the United States was not really united. It was basically 13 little countries that banded together because they all wanted to be free of British rule. And so moving forward, they put together an article of confederation where basically there was no central government. There was no central authority. There was no overarching government. And to be honest, states did what they wanted to. So anytime something was needed, whether it was talking about trade, whether it was talking about international relations with other countries for a new nation, there was no oomph behind it. And so this really tipped off because there was no ability to tax the country consistently. And then there was this thing called Shays Rebellion that lasted for weeks, where basically Revolutionary War vets were mad at taxes that were levied against them, and they went all over the place causing an uproar. And it caused George Washington to reconstitute a version of the United States Army to put it down. And so that was the final tipping straw where people were like, okay, we got to do something that's more central, more powerful, that is rooted in popular sovereignty, meaning that the government represents the will of the people. Next slide. So, how did we get the words and all the stuff that was put together? A lot of it has to do with the Federalist Papers, and that was basically a bunch of letters written between Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Hay, where they talked about the different aspects of what a government should look like, specifically the checks and balances of the different aspects of a federal government and how justice will be sent to the people, to lawmakers across the board. How do you check power for one another? Next slide. So these thoughts had been germinating around the world, especially the West. John Locke, who, famous philosopher, but it really wasn't put into writing in the United States until around 1780. The Massachusetts Constitution was a very big deal because they were the first ones to sit there and talk about justice and the public good. So let me make sure I say that again, the public good. Even back in the formation of the United States, we had people who said the public good should be number one. That is counter to what you're hearing now. Now it's like fend for yourself, public. The government is not going to help. That's not what the founders intended. That's not what the founders intended at all. So the Enlightenment, these high ideas of individual rights were balanced with government accountability on behalf of the public good. Next slide. So when we actually break down the words, we the people, then it was a very radical statement of popular sovereignty. You've got to understand, back when this was written, most of the world was ruled by rulers, kings, chieftains. No matter where you went around the world, no matter what language, this and the other, most of the world was ruled by a single person that made a decision that had overarching authority. United States was going to be different. Now, when we talk about this, we're talking about democratic principles and how rights should apply to everybody. Civil rights, in particular, suffrage movements, these things had to expand from that phrase because originally women, people of color, etc., were not necessarily thought about. But as we have evolved, as this Constitution has evolved, because it's a living document, we now have a better understanding what we the people means. Next slide. A more perfect union. Again, the Constitution was put together to supersede the flawed Articles of Confederation. However, when we say a more perfect union today, philosophically, we mean creating a better United States. And we recognize that the work truly will never be done. We just try to get more unified, better for everybody. No matter where you come from, no matter what your background is, the law and the government should apply equally to everybody. That's how we become a more perfect union. Next slide. Establishing justice. Okay. There was no federal judiciary system under the Articles of Confederation. So if you had a problem, depending on where you lived, you get a different result. Now, while that's still true to some slight degree, there's an overarching federal justice system that says, here's what's right, here's what's wrong, here's how you punish people. Now we look at this as the basis of civil rights, constitutional review, and access to the courts, meaning you will have your day in court, you will have it where you are represented, and you will not have to incriminate yourself when you are in front of that court. It's that simple. Before this, we did not have it. Next, to ensure domestic tranquility. Again, Shays' Rebellion was quite the thing. So imagine January 6th all over the northeast of the country moving like locusts. This created law enforcement parameters, how you can and cannot protest, and to be honest, what empowers a disaster response at the federal and state levels. All of this in one document. Next slide. Provide for common defense. Then to centralize the nation's defense capabilities. Because if you remember, we had militias. They came together to fight the revolution. Those militias went back to being militias. That's the original reason we have the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, because we still operated under a militia setup. However, the Constitution provided the right to have a standing army and standing navy, right? And a commander in chief in charge of it. Now you're looking at not just a military that's the most powerful on earth, but national security infrastructure has been lumped in because of that phrase in the preamble. Next slide. Promote the general warfare. I think this is the biggest debate politically that we deal with now. This enabled Congress to actually create laws on behalf of the nation and the national good. What's happening now is what is considered good is debated. Is it good to have a welfare program? Is it good to have Medicaid? Is it good to have Social Security? Well, these things didn't exist back then. They didn't exist until the 20th century when the Great Depression made us realize that there needs to be a social safety net for times such as those, right? The question of whether healthcare is a universal right or not and who provides it. That is what's being debated under the Constitution. National good is a very, very large, undefined term. That was done on purpose. The founding fathers wrote about how they could not predict the future. It's on us as the current generation and caretakers of the government, of the Constitution, to come up with the right answer. And right now, we are in a heated debate on what promoting general welfare is. Next slide. Secure the blessings of liberty. This was interesting because it was a promise of freedom for future generations, even though they knew everybody that lived in the borders of the United States at that time did not have it. The founding fathers realized the hypocrisy of having slaves and writing these words. But if you read the Federalist Papers, if you read the documents of their personal correspondence, they wrote this hoping that the future generations of America would have the guts to do what they could not. And that's not just with slavery, that is with making, going back to what I said earlier, the perfect union, rights for people, representation for people, um, the ability to live your life the way you want. Nowadays, you're looking at different civil liberties rulings at the Supreme Court level that is basically saying who can impede on those rights, what do those rights mean, and what does it mean to individually be guaranteed those rights. Okay, that is a significant thing, and it's something that when you look at the Supreme Court of the United States and federal judges up and down that hierarchy, that is why the United States Senate has to confirm them, because the Senate is supposed to be the fail safe to make sure that the people sitting the bench understand that line in the preamble. Next. So, those are the major terms of the preamble. It's not a legally binding part of the Constitution. However, it is the morality of the United States of America in the first paragraph. The way it is interpreted, that is how the courts have an existence, but most importantly, it's what defines politics from 1789 to 2025. It's a continuous evolution where liberty and justice consistently evolves to a higher plane than what it was the year before, the generation before, the century before. I want to make sure that people understand the Constitution is only as good as we, the people, live under it, right? Whether you are someone that works in local government, whether you are someone that has an immense amount of power as a business owner or whatever, it applies to all of us. It is supposed to apply equally. And most importantly, without any ambiguity, it ensures that you, as an American citizen, have certain inalienable rights to live your life. You should not have to fear walking down the street and getting just scooped up by people in masks saying they're with the federal government. You should not have to walk down the street and wonder if there is security around you. You should not have to walk down the street and think because I live in a poorer neighborhood, I'm not going to get these certain services that my taxes go to. That is why we have that document. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It was quite a lot. Let's get to some questions here. So the right wing has abdicated their responsibility to the guiding principle. Yes, yes, because, and this is my personal belief, the Constitution is inconvenient when you're trying to maintain power, because the way it is structured, the power of the ideas and the selection of the people means you could lose power if your ideas are not what the people want. Well, there are people who literally cannot live with that. George Washington, in his farewell address, warned against political parties because of that reason. But they didn't listen to him. And literally, he hadn't been in the ground 2 years. And we have political parties jockeying for power and position. Jefferson, Hamilton, these guys. And now we're dealing with what we're dealing with now because we have never really parked that train. I'm waiting for an individual who will rise from all of this and not only unify the country, but not give a damn about the label of a political party. That's when you know the system is working as it was intended. Um, let's see. Are there any other questions before we sign off? Let's see. Huh. Well, you heard from Juliet her here earlier that there are people who are peeling off. Now, I don't think that they were dedicated MAGA people, to be honest. I think they were looking at things in their own best interest. But peeling the numbers off, I think, has already started. I think you're seeing people be more vocal. I think you're seeing people actually questioning what they're seeing for the first time since 2015. I think people went with, like some of the podcasters talked about, vibes. They went with vibes to figure out who they're going to vote for. And you're quickly figuring out vibes ain't policy. Vibes do not help you when you're actually trying to live your life, when you're trying to pay rent, when you're trying to meet payroll, and you can't because you're paying extra money because of these tariffs. Vibes ain't going to help you when you literally see someone literally get scooped off the street in front of you and you're helpless to do anything about it. So I think you're going to start continuing to see all of this. The question is, and someone just asked this, when will they, Donald Trump lose power or whatever? The question is this: as Trump continues with these policies, the clock is ticking, the midterms are coming, but more importantly, those who want to continue this are going to have to see how much more useful he can be before they discard him. And then who tries to assume that mantle? It's going to be very fascinating. Or do we as a people say, no, the fever has broken, we're done? I'll be back next week for any questions, and if you have any type of issues, please, please, please hit me up on my Substack. Just for those who don't know, I am president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership. We're basically a group of veterans, about 10,000 deep, who are looking for ethical, responsible leaders that know what accountability means. That word matters, and who have the best interest of the country, not themselves, not their party first. So again, see you next week. Thanks for listening. And if anything breaks over the weekend that's important, I'll jump on here and go live. Thanks a lot.